This is Innovations of Education, February 11th, 2014. And today we have Dr. Mary Quinn Griffin, who's talking about mentoring in academia of faculty, and a panel discussion will follow.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today I've been asked, as she said, to convene this panel discussion. So first I'd like to introduce our panel members. So I've Dr. Amy Bida, who's going to be representing mentees, and Dr. Daly, who's going to be representing mentors. Dr. Liddell will also represent the mentors, and Dr. Ron Hickman will represent the mentees. So I'm looking forward to a very lively discussion. So I thought I would just open with a couple of slides just to recap on definitions of mentoring. The definitions are really very broad, like can go from giving support or assistance and guidance in learning new skills and adopting behaviors and new attitudes, to simply just describing the relationship between the junior and senior individuals in the relationship. Then in 2003, wherein I looked at the literature, Thorpe and Kalashuk, they defined it as a relationship that provides personal and professional growth. And they came up with a whole idea of the psychological mentoring as well as the academic mentoring. So mentoring in nurse education, we really see it as being with the relationships and interactions and as a path to tenure. And it is an influential factor in retaining new nursing faculty. So why are we talking about mentoring, reasons for mentoring? Well, we want our mentees to develop skills, promote their careers at all levels, whether it's new faculty, mid-career or late career faculty, increasing job satisfaction and reducing stress. The interesting thing in the literature is that the reduction of stress as a result of mentoring is not as great as you might think. The other indicators that I have here are much more important, and then retention of faculty. So I looked at the literature and I came up with 3 articles that identified some key components of effective mentoring, and they were all, they were 3 studies or 3 articles, but it basically was 2 studies, and one of the studies looked at both mentees and mentors as 2 separate articles. So this first study was a qualitative study. It was done in the US, and it looked at 12 universities. There were 12 workshops that they had, and they had 117 mentee dyads. So this was quite a big study that they did. And they came up as a result of this workshop and qualitative study with 8 themes. So communication was right up there on the top. Goals and challenges, passion and inspiration, and that goes with some of the other leadership type literature that's out there that talks about you know, how the heart is so important and embracing the heart. Personal relationships, mutual respect and trust in the dyad, exchange of information in the dyad, and knowledge, and independence and collaboration, and then role modeling. Then these 2 articles were, there were 2 studies, but they were looking at the same dyad. So one looked at mentees and the other looked at mentors. They looked at novice faculty, and this research study was interesting because it looked at part-time and it looked at full-time faculty. So they developed a formal mentorship program, and that's really what they were testing in this particular study. And I brought this today so to just give you an example of what a formal program of study might look like. There were 2 off-campus retreats, and all of the dyads reported that they really liked the fact that it was off-campus, and they had 4 all-day workshops. There were 15 mentors and there were 33 mentees. So everybody had opportunity to talk about who they would like to pair up with. Then they were assigned, the mentees were assigned a formal mentor. In this particular program, they had bi-weekly contact between the mentors and the mentees. And that might be something for the panel to talk a little bit about what is the ideal contact at the different career levels. And they also, the mentees submitted journals to their mentors monthly. It seemed that they liked the journaling. So from the mentees' perspectives, they reported that they liked the relationship, the communication and the openness, guidance and support. These were new faculty, and they had a lot of angst about being thrown in at the deep end. We've all been there, you know, you're told this is your course, and you're going to be teaching the course. So they really liked guidance that they got from the mentors with regard to some of that. They liked the fact that there was a formal education program as part of this. They liked the networking. They liked having a mentor, and they were very positive about the journaling. But they thought that despite having had input into the dyad match, that they could have done a better job with that. So again, the panel might like to talk about how to select your mentor, and they wanted more support for part-time faculty. So from the mentor's perspective in this same dyad, the mentors really talked about the significance of the relationship. They wanted to get to know the mentees, they wanted to connect with them, they wanted this sense of collegiality, and they wanted really to have a reciprocal relationship with them so that they could learn from the mentee as well as the mentee learning from them. The challenges that they felt they had was the lack of time. They didn't feel that they had enough time to engage in meaningful activities with the mentees, because they were really trying to do a good job, and they reported that that was a challenge to do a good mentorship job. They felt that there was potential for power imbalance depending on how the dyad was constructed, and they felt it was a challenge to share their own wisdom. You know, how much should they share? How much should they let the mentee explore? From the mentor's perspective, they liked the educational program. They liked the fact that this whole program gave them the opportunity to have some self-reflection and to look at how they went from being novice to expert. And they felt then that that would give them more insight into how they should help the mentee. So that is just a few key things to hit off. As we know, here at FPB, we are all expected to have a designated mentor. We can have more than one mentor. So again, in the panel, we'll focus on how to select the mentor. So I think it might be nice for Dr. Daly to kick off. We talked a little bit about what's in the literature about mentoring challenges. But as a successful mentor, to give us some insight into your mentoring methods.
Well, I was mulling over the topic this morning, and a couple of observations I think are not new, but just to reinforce the importance of some of these points. You know, similar to what one study reported, I think the match is just absolutely critical. It just, I find it almost impossible to be an effective mentor if it's not a good match between the mentee and myself in terms of their style and their career goals and what they're looking for. So I think that initial decision is very important. And it has to start with the mentee. I think the mentee has to, you know, give some thought to what sorts of skills and expertise they're looking for. A very new person might primarily just need to have somebody who's embedded in the environment and can help them with the nuts and bolts and help them avoid sand traps and what have you, whereas someone perhaps as they start their own career path, you know, if they're trying to improve their teaching skills, they might want to really pick somebody who's known to be, you know, a really excellent teacher. But if they're trying to develop a program of research, then they want somebody who's into that. And so I think that decision of who you want to work with is really critical. And then the ball sort of passes to the mentor to have some input into, you know, I think I can be helpful to you, I'm willing to devote the time, because it is a time commitment. It's not, that's probably lesson number 2 is, this is not nothing. This is not just something you can do without some thought, and, you know, it's a formal responsibility and has to be taken seriously.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to? So Dr. Lindell, you mentor many different levels of faculty. So how do the mentoring needs of new faculty who have formal education experience differ from new faculty that do not have the formal education experience?
I think that's a really good question. I know for myself, there's an overlap for myself as program director with orientation versus mentoring, especially for individuals as they join our faculty, if they're from outside the school, and they need some transition time because we ask them on their evaluations or their self-report to identify someone, but many times when individuals first come to the school, their needs might be different. They need to learn, you know, how our place works and who to contact for what and logistical things, but also priorities of the school, you know, and things like that, kind of our culture. And it's hard for them to identify someone to be a mentor internally, and they might have someone outside because, you know, they may not be familiar with our faculty. So I think that's a role that I have had, and many of the individuals that I've encountered over the years that have come as new faculty, especially those who are teaching pre-licensure and maybe instructors, or start as lecturers and then instructors, and then maybe move on through their education or whatever to maybe assistant professor. A lot of that is informal, and many have not been educators before, so that's a big transition as well. So not just coming into this institution and this organization, but then adjusting to the educator role. And so I think it's very challenging for individuals to come in as new faculty or joining our organization and new to the educator role. And so I think that, and then transitioning from orientation, which is one role that I've had quite a bit as program director, but then some people I wind up moving into a mentoring relationship, and then some find someone else.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments or panel? So, Dr. Beda, as a new faculty now, as assistant professor, what would you be looking for in a mentor?
I think the primary thing I would be looking for in a mentor is to find someone that thinks differently than I do, but then at the same time can give me their perspective. And because when you find somebody that thinks differently, you have a more rounded idea of where you're headed and what you're trying to accomplish. And I also would like to find somebody that would like challenge my opinions and make me think differently, maybe go outside my comfort zone and think outside the box a little more. Because when you're a graduate student, you sort of are in this little protective bubble with certain people that you know you can depend on, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into the real world of academia, and it's like a giant sand trap. So that's what I really would look for in a mentor. And also, was a slide about job stress. I need somebody to help me funnel through the maze of academia. It's probably the most stressful part of the job, is figuring who's who on what committee and where this fits into the greater scheme of the university, what the mindset is of the School of Nursing, and it just is it's suffocating sometimes. And I find that one of the most stressful things about the job. So somebody that can guide me along with a little seeing eye dog and help me through some of that.
Okay. Dr. Hickman, as you were on the tenure track, what would you be looking for in a mentor?
So for me, when I thought about my mentor, it was a natural progression being a dissertation advisor, but my advice is that I not only look at a primary mentor, but I really try to establish a mentoring team. And I think that's been an approach that has been most effective for me. And I think some of the panelists and some of the researchers already highlighted that, when you really look at the primary mentor, particularly in a tenure earning position, having that scientific match, a clinical match is important. But I put a lot of this onus on the mentee to drive the relationship, to do a really good self-assessment of what he or she needs from their various mentors. I think when I classify my own needs, I see them as instrumental and relational. There are times where I just need to be told what I need to do to navigate the academic process. There are times where I need relationship, I need open communication, I need an opportunity to vent, to say, is this just me, or is this right where I need to be? So I see, one, identifying your needs from your primary mentor, but also establishing informal mentorships. There are folks in the room that I can ask questions to, or just go to, or to understand some of the processes that take place. And so I think it's really important, the first step of the mentee is to do a self-assessment of their needs and understand what is it that they're seeking from their mentors. And then also to say that it's a two-way reciprocity here. It's not only am I coming to you for your expertise, but what can I donate to this relationship? How can I kind of help you with some things too? Maybe it's understand or recall some of the early perspectives of a junior faculty member that's pre-tenure. So I think, again, it's important to, as the mentee identifies a mentor, but to go through it as a self-reflecting process to understand the multitudes of needs that are out there, but also to give back in that relationship.
Okay. I think you bring up some really good points. The mentee certainly has the responsibility to initiate the relationship. I think you're not going to walk along the hall and find that a faculty person comes up to you and says, would you like me to be your mentor? So I think you have to do that self-reflection and then approach the mentor, prospective mentor, or maybe more than one mentor, because as you said, you have many different areas that you would like some expertise in, and perhaps one mentor may not fulfill all of those needs for you at that particular time.
I also think that as far as the mentee goes, that they still have to be responsible for their own development and career path and respect the boundaries of the mentor, that they just don't have this revolving door to their office where you can just go in and out. So that's always something that comes up because, as Dr. Daly said, it's a time commitment also. So it always has to be in your mind.
And that was one thing that came out very clear in that in the article by White, and the second article, the companion of it with the mentors, that one of the mentors was quite distressed because the mentee had said to them, oh, now that you're my mentor, I can put you on speed dial. And I can contact you at any time or email you at any time. And so the mentor discusses the fact that, that wasn't her perception of the time commitment that she was going to have to put into this mentee-mentor relationship. So I think, that's a very, very good point. Any other points, Jen?
I think too, it's probably something that we could do a better job of is during orientation of new faculty is talking about mentoring and some of these things about what it is and why it's important, and that it's not, and why we don't assign someone here, because that is a philosophy of that the individual and the mentor come together, in a mutual way, and yet individuals, start on faculty, and next thing they know, they're doing their activity thing and it says mentor, and either they don't put anybody or and then they're told, well, why don't you have someone there? Or they'll just like call me up or call, can I put you down? And so I think just helping people understand, because many times individuals, I think in nursing, if you've come through different positions and worked in different places and part-time and full-time, and then you go to graduate school and then you do this and that, you may not have encountered this in a formal way. And so we need to give individuals, I think, permission to kind of begin this process as part of their becoming a part of the faculty.
And again, it's becoming important in a formal way to have that identified, because one of the items on the ACEN accreditation points for faculty is asking, was there mentorship? So, orientation and mentorship seem to be the two areas that are increasing in importance for all faculty to have, and for the school to be able to demonstrate that they do have those activities.
And I'd like to just echo a part, as an early pre-tenure faculty member, there's opportunities to go other places for positions. And I have to say that I feel like the strength of mentorship, at least at FUB, was the selling factor to stay here, because I have developed that mentorship. And so having formal structures of mentorship, whether it's research, education, or even clinical mentorship, is important not only for the retention of our faculty, but also the growth. And I would think that, demonstrating good mentorship practices in our faculty would also help convert many of our students. I mean, these things kind of trickle down. Faculty who mentor within can also demonstrate that to our students. And I think, having a more formalized mentorship program would be a strength.
Thank you. So Dr. Daly, another question for you. How do you assist new faculty in understanding all the different roles that we have here in the school, teaching, scholarship, research, and service, as they start here in the faculty role?
I find that, one of the challenges, I think, of being a mentor is to sort of modify your approach to make it appropriate to the level of the mentee, in a sense. As we've said, a new faculty, somebody new to the school, somebody new to the role, that kind of thing. I think that I put those things you've mentioned kind of under the heading of role components, in a sense. Those are things we all have to address. So it easily fits into preparing somebody for their faculty evaluation. That's an easy time to say, now, you go online, you have to do this dreaded form, and here's the things you have to be able to speak to, and it's a nice way to organize it. And it's fairly straightforward, I think. Although it's something that I think is important to go over every year, because it's also a nice way to track career progression. But I find actually that something that's been helpful to me has really been just not anything I've done, but what my mentees have done, which is coming with an agenda, which I find very helpful, because first of all, that means they're taking the responsibility to point out what their needs are. They're identifying the topics they want to learn about, and it gives a structure to the meeting. It keeps it focused, and it's easy to say, we need to talk about this. I don't see that on your list, and so, but it's that kind of structure I find really useful.
I think another thing that is useful to clarify or discuss is the difference between a supervisory or management relationship and a mentoring relationship. Not that a person's supervisor can't be a mentor, but they are different roles. And I would probably recommend that someone have, if they have a a supervisor that they report to in an administrative way, and that they perceive or have even a formal relationship as a mentor, that it probably is useful to have someone else as well, because they're different roles, and they can conflict sometimes. And the advice you might, I mean, even if there's no conflict, you might give different advice or discuss different issues as a supervisor.
You're not doing well with your supervisor, you ought to move.
Right. Or for your career, you need to do this. But your supervisor, you want this.
Yeah, I mean, like, the supervisor might say, you discuss something that the person might benefit from enhancing, or even a problem, should arise. But then the mentor might be the one they would go to sort that out.
Right.
And so those are, gets complicated.
Any other comments? Well, perhaps we could open it up to the floor for some questions.
Is your thinking that everybody needs a mentor?
I mean,
or the group, you focus primarily on new faculty.
Right.
But I was just curious what your thoughts were as people progress.
We did mention the fact that having a mentor, for new faculty, for mid-career, or for late career. And I think the differences and the expectations would be very different at each of those levels. I think that at mid-career, the focus on the mentorship would be guiding more into leadership roles, particularly. So yes, I think that the mentorship is very important at all levels.
The National League for Nursing has a mentoring position statement and a toolkit that they developed, or a task force developed a few years ago, and they identify the early career, mid-career, and later career, what that might look like in terms of the mentee role at each point and the mentor role at each point. And I think it's very useful, and they did it largely to address issues around retention, like faculty, and helping nurses who were transitioning from non-academic roles into the academic.
I can post the link for that.
Oh, that'd be great,
on the
thanks.
website. And I'll also compose these slides and the other references. The NLN toolkit is very useful, but the focus of that would be on the faculty educator. Whereas I think that the mid-career and later career of the faculty researcher would have many different aspects when you look at this particular toolkit.
Like one aspect. I think too, even, I can't remember the exact word you used, but do you have to have a mentor? I mean, like here at the school, we say, sign on the dotted line, fill it in, I don't know if we're at the point yet, but I'm waiting for when the FAS won't accept you, like that red thing will come up, I was like, you left this blank, like other forms do these days. But, it's like an expectation here, and we don't assign, so I think that reflects part of the philosophy that it's this collaborative relationship. But on the other hand, there is an expectation to.
And the one concern I have about it is, when you think about it, there's no point in your career when you can't benefit from sage advice from somebody else. But I think the kinds of things one needs, sort of well into your career are so different from what one needs when you're either in a new role or a new place, that I worry it dilutes the meaning of mentor by saying, somebody who's been doing this for 30 years and, is a full professor and, needs a mentor. Well, they need access to people who can be supportive and answer specific issues or whatever, but it's so different from what somebody needs when they're new.
Correct.
I'm a little uncomfortable with using the same word, because it's really a very different role, I think.
Well, I think mentor and the definition, I reviewed just a couple of the definitions, but the most common one would be that you have your inexperienced or your new person, and then the more experienced person. But in some individuals' minds, the experienced person has to be an older person. And in convening this panel, I was contacting different faculty because I was trying to have a panel with different levels. And one person, I'd asked them, because they are fairly new on faculty, they were able to do the mentee role. And so they emailed me back and said, mentee? I could be a mentor, you know. So again, they were thinking in terms of, like, you know, age, experience, etc., whereas I was thinking of the role that they were having, the faculty role that they were having here. So you could see that there was a disconnect in how people perceive whether they are in a mentee role or a mentor role. I think we all have those two roles in different situations, because all of us are mentors perhaps to more junior faculty, but we are also have a mentee role because we are looking for mentorship and guidance. And I think that's something we sometimes forget.
I think that's very important that, you know, we all keep in mind as we work with anyone joining our faculty, whatever group they're coming through, whether they have a lot of experience or they're new to teaching or whatever the role is, or they've been here maybe as a student, so we kind of think, oh, you know, they've been around, or maybe they've taught some clinical as a student, they've had peripheral different roles. And I know in teaching DMP students, they'll say, I mean, I have a couple who are advisees right now, which is another deviation or variation of the role, that they've gone into teaching at X point in their career, many times after having very established, like one had owned their own consulting company and this and that and gerontology and all this, and then they go into teaching and they feel like they have entered this entire new world and feel very lesser. And yet it's, when you think of Benner's novice to expert, you can be expert somewhere and you know, be willing to, those who are willing to take on a new role, even though it's a lot harder than they originally think it's going to be. I mean, they should get, you know, we should honor that and all, but acknowledge that it's coming into a different culture, and they often say, I had no idea how much was involved in nursing education. And so we have to help them, because they've made a commitment to that transition.
Any more questions?
I think
Yes.
one thing that Dr. Daly did for me when I transitioned from a postdoc into a faculty position is she gave me an article about mentoring and the mentee relationship, and it talked about managing up. And I'm sure Ron probably got the same one, where it really is the responsibility of a mentee to be the driver of this relationship as much as possible, and come to meetings prepared with an agenda and, you know, areas that need to be discussed. And so that was really helpful. I think another thing, just want to kind of highlight here, in terms of what Barb had mentioned, in terms of you really have to tailor it to the type of individual, but also the role that they're in, or if someone's in a dual role, how complex that is in terms of mentoring that person and really understanding the demands in a dual role where you're 50-50, and keeping that person on track for a tenure position that's, I think, very challenging on both sides.
And I was talking to Mano Singham, who's the director of USite, and they recently began, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, a mentoring fellowship to train faculty on how to be a good mentor. And his view, and the view that USite has taken, is that everyone needs a mentor. And I can appreciate what you said about the intricacies, Dr. Daly, But it seems like senior faculty perhaps could co-mentor one another, since you both would understand the intricacies, you know, of senior faculty. And I thought that was interesting, because I never thought that senior faculty would need mentoring, you know, full professor, you know. But he disagrees with that, so I was surprised to learn that.
So I think one of the challenges, this is sort of background to this issue, one of the challenges in being an effective mentor is, you know, I think there's a continuum from, you know, at one end is, you know, I'm the mentor, you belong to me, you know, your success is my success, you know, your failure is my failure, so, you know, it's too heavy.
Right.
But at the other end is, you know, it's up to you, and you make it or you don't, it's nothing to do with me. And really, what we want, of course, is something in the middle. I think we want mentors to believe, to have a commitment to that person's success. You know, that is important, that's the point of this flow. But you don't want to be so hovering, you know, and you also don't want to be so unconcerned that, you know, I have no responsibility, because a mentor does, you do have responsibility. But that, see, when I put it in that framework, then it honestly doesn't make sense to me to say, you know, somebody like me, you know, who's kind of looking at that good retirement, you know, I don't need a mentor. I need to be able to go to somebody if I have a research question, and I need somebody who will be a personal support to me when I'm having a tough time, and I, you know, but I don't call that a mentor, because it doesn't have that continuum. I need support and advice, yes, absolutely, but I don't think I need a mentor, you know, but that's my view, because of, I mean, I think, to me, mentorship is really important. I mean, it is really important. It's a formal, it's a job, it's a responsibility, and it's not something that everybody needs, but that's my view.
Molly, do you have any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, lots of thoughts go through my mind. I know when I first started here, I was sort of shocked by the lack of any real formal mentoring, and I was thankful I had taught, you know, at another community college, because it's very different coming to a university like this, first of all, than a community college, and the culture and everything, and, you know. So that was a big curve, so I tried to be sympathetic to the new people. Like, I had 3 new people that I guess I'm kind of their mentor, because I'm the course coordinator, and they're teaching clinicals for the first time, so that, you know, contract person that doesn't have a clue of even how to get their name badge, or, you know, how to get a paycheck. And I'm trying to write down all the process of even, you know, what do you do when you get the contract, because there's a lot of steps that they have to do, and it can be overwhelming. But I've used articles like you, and I think actually giving some books on teaching, especially clinical teaching, to people who have never, I think resources, I give sometimes my own, just or loan them, because it is such a different thing. It's sort of overwhelming. And then when you're first teaching, you can't attend things like faculty meetings, or you don't serve on committees, and I've learned a lot just, you know, sitting in, now that I've been able to, where that whole culture of how important faculty is, and full faculty, you don't appreciate so much when you're maybe in a full-time clinical role or something. So it's definitely a process. And I have Barb as a mentor now. I've glommed onto her, which is wonderful, because I don't even know what questions I need to ask sometimes. As a new, you know, when I was new, it's like, I don't know what any of that is. So I don't even, you know, coming in, you just have so many things like you said, the particular culture of this place, and what the roles are and the expectations, that's a need, I think. So, I don't know. I'm rambling, but I think we all mentor in some ways, even if we're junior faculty. Obviously, we have relationships and new people coming in that oftentimes, if you're willing, they will latch on and use you as a resource too. So I think I know we've been talking about that for quite a while, formal, and I'm glad that you're working with that, because I think it's really needed. And a lot of people have told me that they just felt completely lost when they first, and it's not that people don't want to help, but it's just, you know, we're all so busy and life happens, and so, I've had some great mentors here. Some, like Ron said, not officially my mentor, but just people, like Ron, who's next to me in the office, I can ask him a question, and so.
Any other
It's
questions?
interesting, I was just gonna say that for the program directors, we do evaluations for lecturers and instructors. And on occasion, there's a lecturer or instructor will put down for a mentor the name of another lecturer or instructor. And sometimes faculty of higher rank might go, oh, gee, you know, they should have somebody. But then when you talk with them, because then I'll say, well, I'll call the person and just talk with them and see, they'll say, that's who I can relate to. That's who I feel comfortable with. That's who does similar work to what I'm doing, you know, roles to what I'm doing. And so it is kind of interesting how people perceive how that could play out.
But I think also, going back to this idea of, you know, the experience, it might be at the same university level on faculty, but an instructor might be here quite a while at that level, so that they would have a lot of experience to offer the juniors.
Right, and that's what they often talk about when we talk with them. And they'll say, I really don't know anyone else. You know, if somebody's comes in and is teaching clinical 2 days a week, and maybe they're doing some advanced practice, and if they're not here like on a Monday when we have faculty, I mean, you don't feel connected. Your course leader may be the initial person that you feel connection with in more than a course leader way.
Any more questions?
Not that I'm thinking of this, but how do you end the relationship? I don't think anybody ever talks about that. And the whole concept of long distance mentoring.
So Susan, like in preparation of this talk, I had read some things on mentorship, and that did come up. So
Yes,
when do you know to terminate your mentor? And I think it goes back to the mentee. The mentee is the driver of initiation and termination. You know, in academia, things take you in different ways or different paths. You start out thinking, I'm going to be tenure earning, and realize that that might not be the path. And so you switch gears, and you might need a new primary mentor with a different focus. And so I think that comes with time, and it comes with sort of getting to know each other and sort of doing that self-assessment. But I believe if you're thinking about termination, I think the termination, if you're going to cut it cold turkey, would come from the mentee. Or, as Dr. Daly, as a mentor, would you say sometimes when you just assess things aren't working well?
You know, honestly, I've never had a sort of formal termination. You know, I've never been fired, you know. Hop on the bus, Gus. Yes. But I think they do, you know, because I do see it as a pretty formal, you know, substantial activity. I think as people develop, as you said, Ron, they develop different needs, or they just are growing and they don't need as much anymore. I mean, the mentee stops making monthly appointments and maybe checks in every 6 months, and that's, you know, it sort of comes to a natural end. So I've never had one where like either one of us said, you know what, this isn't working, we need to divorce, you know. So, you know, it seems to just sort of dwindle normally in a sense. But I've also had people who, you know, maybe they don't work here anymore and they've gone somewhere else, and I hardly ever see them except at a conference. But they'll call if they need something, you know. We'll have an hour-long phone call once a year, and that's what they need, and that's fine with me, and so.
I think it is the responsibility of the mentee, but it may also be that there was a mismatch there that maybe wasn't really recognized at the time, or that perhaps you've outgrown your mentor, or you might feel you need more than one mentor. But I think the termination of the relationship is the responsibility of the mentee. It may also be that when you go for your annual review and they look at, you know, who you have for your mentor, they may recommend that you add another mentor, or perhaps that you change your mentor. So again, there might be some other inputs, but it would still be coming back to the mentee.
I think there's a need, especially for the educational mentoring piece, because so many of nurses that first come in may be excellent clinically, but there's that whole learning curve. I mean, I know I was just talking to Becky Patton this morning, who's obviously very accomplished, but she was like, it's just now that I'm starting to feel like, you know, there's so much to learn when you take that role, and you can be an excellent bedside nurse, but teaching us so many other facets to it that, you know, I really wanted to learn and still want to learn. It's a life, I think it's a lifetime thing, growing as a teacher, but as an educator. But I think the more we can do that, the more, you know, I know we have a lot of leaders in our field here as well, so.
Well, I think we are coming near to the end of our time, so if any of the panel would like to have some closing thoughts. Well, I would just say that mentoring is important, as we've all agreed, and here at FPB, everybody has to have a mentor. So if you have not identified a mentor, you need to start thinking about the characteristics that you require in a mentor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.